conquer and we're going to take some. Is that understood? Yes, sir. That's what we're going to do, sweethearts. We are going to go and get some. All right, people, on the ready line. Are you me? Yeah! Are you me? Yeah! What are you?
Read EP Magazine's February issue to learn tips for medical and dental visits with an individual with special needs. Also check out the military section. To read more, sign up for free today at www.epmagazine.com.
Monotony. It comes in all shapes and sizes. Dull, tedious, just plain boring. But what is this? A contender, perhaps? Something unboring by the looks of it. Jabs right at dull, an uppercut to tedium, something that keeps you on your toes, keeps your head on a swivel, a knockout punch to your old, boring workouts. Welcome to Fight Camp.
Oscar Mike Radio is a proud podcast partner of Reach Across America Radio, heard every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They're also big supporters of the nonprofit I Got Your Six, Two Lives at Once. And with every wreath you sponsor through Oscar Mike Radio, $5 goes back to this great organization dedicated to making a difference in the lives of veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders battling PTSD. Two Lives at Once pairs these brave men and women together with dogs rescued from kill shelters. In this way, two lives are saved at the same time by saving each other. Donate now. Go to reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio to help. That's reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio.
I remember a time when I was in a not so good place, and these games and these activities and being able to come and have the camaraderie that we have here, it makes me feel like I'm not alone. There are people here that have been through what I've been through. It makes me feel like I don't know, I'm part of something great.
Just let yourself go. Give it a try.
Hello and welcome back to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis, Marine Corps veteran and your host. Oscar Mike Radio is co-produced with Sinister One Productions. What's your podcast doing? I want to thank my sponsor, Joyce Asack of Asack Real Estate, and my supporters, Cason Shaving Company, Exceptional Parent Magazine, and Fight Camp. Be your strongest combination. I love guests like the one I have coming up. Marine, check, yay. A Mustang, double check. And then an Air Wing Marine, which we're the redheaded stepchildren of the Marine Corps, but also he's in a very cool nonprofit space that, involves something that I love doing a whole lot of. I'm not going to spoil it for you. I'm not going to get into it. I'm going to let him do it, but I'm so excited to introduce Mr. John, aka Saint Langford, to Oscar Mike Radio. Sir, thank you for your time. Welcome to the show.
Travis, good morning. It's great to connect always with a fellow Marine, and as you said, with a fellow air winger. My dad was an infantry platoon commander in Vietnam when I was born, and he never let me forget that I was a air winger. So
Yeah, we just swing at the wing. You
yeah,
guys, the smart Marines. That's an oxymoron I was told that several times.
yep,
But you had an interesting career starting out in your, overall Marine Corps experience where you joined the Marine Corps as enlisted, and then you got into, um, you know, flying, yay. And then we have this really cool story where you advocate for and lead Project Healing Waters. So let's just start with that. How did your dad served in the infantry? How did you decide to follow in his footsteps, or try to anyway?
yeah. He was, as I said, he was in Vietnam. I was born in Oceanside, California, so we met, when I was a year old, which I don't recall, but fairly common, as you understand, with people on deployment, whether it's combat or otherwise. And so um, the was in college. I was a little lost after my freshman year, and said, you know what, I need to get my butt kicked a little bit and then find some focus. And so I enlisted in 1986, went to beautiful Paris Island, and then I served 4 years in the reserves as I finished up college, and then
Well,
got
wait.
yeah.
How did you go to Paris Island if you were born in Oceanside? You should have been an MCRD Marine.
Well, if I'd stayed in California, I would have been. My
Oh,
dad did 5 years in the Marine Corps, and then he spent almost 30 years in the FBI. And so he was stationed at FBI headquarters
oh,
when I was
okay.
in high school.
Gotcha.
So
All right.
cross the country to the other side.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So finished up my degree, and I got commissioned in 1990, and had the good fortune through the basic school, which all Marine second lieutenants go through for 6 months, to get selected for a naval flight officer slot. So I went down to Pensacola and was able to get an F-18 Delta Hornet backseater as a weapons and sensors officer. And the two-seat Hornet back then was brand new to the Marine Corps, just replacing
No.
the
Wait a minute.
A6.
Maybe miss here, but I thought you were enlisted first.
I was, yeah. So I worked on, that's right. I blew through the enlisted career, but I was an ejection seat mechanic on the venerable F-4 Phantom out of Andrews Air Force Base. So loved,
Did you,
yeah.
did you ever get a chance to actually go for a ride in the ejection seat simulator?
No, I did not. And I also was hoping to get a ride in the actual ejection seat that I worked on in the F4, but it just didn't work out. It was one of the priorities I made when I became an officer and was in a squadron. We got to get as many of our young, hard charging enlisted Marines, Marine of the Quarter, et cetera, but got them in the back seat to experience, because they're doing all the hard work. You understand that.
So, just not to spend too much time here, but this is a very interesting, concept. A lot of people don't understand that a lot of especially in the Marine Corps, the aircraft, the cryogenics, the avionics, the nav, all that is maintained in service by 18 to 21-year-olds with like a 27-year-old to 30-year-old shop supervisor looking over them. And they're working on multi-million-dollar aircraft that not only have to function right, but, oh yeah, as a bonus, keep you alive.
Yeah.
What was that like when you were actually, an officer flying one of these things, thinking about that?
I think I had in any Marine Corps unit, you got operations, and, obviously, and you understand, on the air wing, we had the aviation maintenance department. And so first of all, when I came in as a young first lieutenant and then captain, just had a deep connection with the enlisted Marines, because they learned pretty quick that my initial primary MOS was buffer tech when I was enlisted, and we, stripped and waxed every field day. And so I understood the hard work and the long hours they put in. And as I got promoted, my second fighter squadron was the aviation maintenance officer. So I ran the entire maintenance department, and I loved going in on night crew, at 2 a.m, because I lived on base. I was a geo bachelor for a couple of years, and just sit down with the Marines and say, hey, Lance Corporal, tell me what you're working on. And not in a fake way, but I just knew how deeply they committed themselves to, like you said, the avionics, all the things when we flip the switch and we go fly and we do our pre-flights and take off, and those things work because those young men and women are putting in long hours to get the jet up and ready. So deep respect for them, because I know from where I came. So
Well, I got to ask this next. I mean, I was air defense in the Marine Corps, sir, and we get to practice on you all every now and then. Our lieutenants were very happy when we got a simulated kill on one of you all. It was a good day for us.
as well they should be.
What was it? What was it like training? Did you ever do any serious training against air defense? Because it's my understanding it's not so much part of the curriculum anymore because the Air Force kind of takes care of that for you all.
Yeah, so one of the missions for the two-seat Hornet was suppression of enemy air defense. So that was one of our core missions, SEAD as we called it. The Air Force calls it SEAD. And you're right, we had the complement of the EA-6B Prowler and then the Hornets with high-speed anti-radiation missiles, the HARM missiles. And so that was a big part of our training. I had the good fortune to go through the weapons and tactics instructor course at Marine Aviation and Weapons and Tactics Squadron, or MOTS 1 in Yuma. And that's a varsity course. And the Hawk guys were out there.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm sure you supported some MOTS classes.
yes, we did. We did.
And then deployments twice to Aviano, Italy during the Bosnian peacekeeping. And so we went through some more specialized electronic warfare ranges that really tested both the systems that we had on board and our ability to suppress them. So yeah, pretty exciting mission.
Awesome. Awesome. I just like to ask because I talked to some pilots and it was like, we just don't focus on that a whole lot anymore. To the point where talking to some of the older pilots, they actually had to be able to plot. Okay, we got some SAM batteries here. We got to know how to fly and we got to know how to do the countermeasures and make sure we can do it. And helicopters for us are a real challenge because they can hover. Anyway.
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, and that's where MOTS, the WTI, the Weapons and Tactics Instructor course, again, for it's not exactly a Top Gun, but for listeners who may not know, it's an advanced weapons training school, and the tactics that we use there were pretty high speed. And so it really tested your ability to evade, not only to find the threats, evade the threats, and also continue with the mission, most often a strike mission, but you land and you're pretty exhausted by that point.
Sure. Okay, well then I have to ask, did you watch Top Gun 2, which featured the aircraft you flew or a variant of it?
Yeah, a couple times.
Did you feel a sense of pride and camaraderie that the old girl got her day in the sun? Because the reason I say that is it seems like, just to this air defense people, that the F-22, the F-35, the Tomcats, and the Eagles get their day. They all get their, but the F-18's kind of like, just good old reliable. It doesn't get the pizzazz that the other aircraft get. I think that's negligence on our part.
Well, it is a multi-role aircraft, right? It does the air-to-air fighter work and the air-to-ground, which they're almost all multi-role at this point, just because of the need to be able to go back and forth in the mission. But yeah, I watched Top Gun. It wasn't the reason I enlisted, but of course the original one came out in '86, the same year that I enlisted. I know there were a lot of enlisted Navy who saw that and said, man, I'm going to go in and be a fighter guy. And they were in their dungarees in the bowels of a ship somewhere after the recruiter got them to boot camp. So, but yeah, when the second Top Gun came out, the amazing thing is just the realism. I mean, they're flying jets. Yeah. So it was, obviously it's Hollywood and it's Tom Cruise, but it's pretty exciting to watch because the jets are actually flying. So
nice. You do all this and we kind of talk the same language. We did several WTIs and MOTS training for out there in good old sunny Yuma, as you will recall.
Yeah.
And you do all this. What was your transition out of the Marine Corps like? Because I've told other officers this, sir. Us enlisters sitting there and we're buffing the floors to a nice high shine. And we think when you all get out, there's a stretch limo that pulls up to the base. You go back to your homestead and, there's a 21 gun salute with the red roll. you guys don't have any of the problems us enlisted people have because you're officers. So I
Right.
just was curious, sir. Was it like that for you? Was there a aplomb and fanfare when you got out?
Yeah, and again, Travis, you can understand, I love when, especially an enlisted Marine, especially didn't know that I was also enlisted, and they're like, "Sir, you don't understand." I'm like, "Sit down, son, and let's talk." So, but I mean, my transition was fairly seamless just because of where I was. My flying tours were both at Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort in South Carolina, which absolutely love. Great place to raise the now 5 adult kids. And so I retired in October of 2009. And again, you understand this, but the Marine Corps has a bungee to all of us to Quantico or the Pentagon. And so I was able to come back to Quantico for a couple different tours and schools, and that's where I retired. I ran the Semper Fit branch at headquarters Marine Corps. But I had a lot of connections and built up a pretty good network, total of 23 years in the Marine Corps. I'm in the National Capital Region. And so, as I like to joke, you couldn't swing a retired lieutenant colonel very far without landing in a defense contractor job. And so I did that for a couple years. And again, the transition, and I'd love to talk about how we support service members in their transition challenges because it can really be challenging. But for me, it was pretty seamless. It just a couple years in defense contracting. I worked for TRX, if you're familiar with the fitness company.
Yeah, yeah.
I got introduced to them when I was running the Semper Fit branch, and that was 07 to 09. And you think about how long the country had been in combat, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so the TRX was such a perfect tool to help maintain some operational fitness downrange. So got to know the company, and then later had the distinct privilege to run their military and government sales. That was an incredibly fun job. And then I was a triathlon race director for a couple of years, which was fun. But I really just had a heart to come back and serve in some capacity, and that's how I found my way back into the veteran nonprofit space.
So you got out, and then you use your relationships and your contacts in the Marine Corps to do more work in the defense space, the TRX system. A lot of Marines that I knew at the time, I was clearly out them, but they liked it because it was portable but effective when they didn't have the normal gym stuff there.
Right.
And then you do come in the nonprofit space. So kind of, I might be putting the cart before the horse a little
No.
bit here, but when it comes to leading a company or organization, did your Marine Corps experience benefit you greatly when you started going into these spaces you hadn't been before, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. I think any Marine, officer enlisted, regardless of how long they're in. I mean, the literal now crucible. I don't think the crucible was there when you went through boot camp either, or had it been implemented.
It's funny factoid. I was the last one to not, we were the last MCT class in 99, 95, excuse me. And the next boot camp class in MCRD was going to do the Crucible. I missed it
Okay.
by literally one evolution.
Yeah, and I remember when it came out, and because we all know everything when we're young Marines, and I was like, man, boot camp is boot camp. But I have now 2 of my 5 adult kids are active duty Marines. One was a Staff Sergeant Grunt who just pinned on second lieutenant last month, so he's following the same path. And another one is a aviation mechanic at Miramar as a corporal. But I think any of us go through that crucible experience. It teaches you self-discipline. It teaches you that you're able to achieve probably more than we thought we did, pre-Marine Corps. And then to have the benefit of going through multiple schools as an officer and be in pretty senior leadership again, to be able to run the aviation maintenance department for a Marine Corps fighter squadron and all that entails. And then you go to headquarters Marine Corps, where I ran our officer plan section. So we did all entry level accessions, and then I went to Semper Fit branch. So a lot of administrative and sort of executive level administrative roles that at least prepare you to hopefully have the humility to go, man, I don't know everything in this new job, but I certainly know how to find the information and surround myself with team members who can help fill the gaps. And that's where I am right now. But
Nice.
yeah, it definitely helped.
You start getting into the nonprofit space from coming from, let's just call it defense, military,
Yep.
and then, working at the Pentagon and in that area. I'm not saying you worked at the Pentagon, and then the nonprofit space. How do you go from all that to leading a nonprofit that specializes in fishing programs for veterans?
Yeah. So I think it was when I was at, well, I know it was, I was at TRX. We had a group of warriors from Wounded Warrior Project come out to the headquarters in San Francisco, and all of them had very severe post-traumatic stress. They were, couple had some limb loss. One was in a wheelchair, and we brought them in for, I think, 4 days with some of the amazing trainers that I was not, but to help just give them some confidence with the tools that on the TRX. And, they struggled to have the self-confidence to go into a gym. Maybe they didn't even have the capacity to get themselves there. And so we were able to give them a tool in the TRX and give them the confidence. And, and it's like any group situation. Everybody shows up, kind of head down, not sure about this. By the end of the day, like they all had each other's numbers, but they all had this, they stood taller, sat up taller, because they're like, I can do this and I can have this tool in my house and it gives me confidence. And it really changed my perspective on, man, we have a group of service members and veterans, whether they have physical wounds, whether they have invisible wounds, or whether they're really struggling, again, for a transition experience that was completely opposite of mine. If you're at a base, you have all the resources on a base, and maybe you go to your hometown, and I won't pick a hometown because I've done this before, and someone texted me and said, hey, why'd you bag on? I'm like, I'm not doing that. But my whole point is, if you have all those resources and then you get out of the Marine Corps or any of the branches, we'll talk Marine Corps because that's our experience, but man, there's that tribe and there's the camaraderie and all those things that you experienced in a Hawk battery and I did in a fighter squadron. And then you go maybe home where there's no military infrastructure whatsoever. And a lot of people feel lost. So many people go, yep, we're right back here. I feel good, and off we go. But it's those that are struggling. And so it was that moment with the Wounded Warrior Project team that I just saw, man, I would love to get back into a place of service. So I started looking for some nonprofits that I could support. My first foray was with the Marine Corps Scholarship Foundation.
Oh, nice.
In 2015, I was the director of national events, and for those that don't know, another great organization. And there's so many of us in this space. There's some really key ones, but they give scholarships to sons and daughters of Marines and Navy corpsmen who served with the Marine Corps. But I really, that from a business standpoint, started to understand what the fundraising component that's so critical, obviously, to keeping nonprofits open and growing and having impact, and how interaction with donors works. And so it was a really tremendous lab, for lack of a better term, for me to learn the business of nonprofits. I will say a lot of people, when you put those two terms together, business and nonprofit, they're like, well, wait, it's a nonprofit. And nonprofits are a business. A 501c3 is a tax status. And so that was my first role, helped me understand the business of nonprofits and the impact that they were having, which really solidified my decision. And then I went from there to another national nonprofit called Hope for the Warriors.
I haven't heard of them, but okay.
Yeah, they were founded, they're in their 19th year. They were founded at Lejeune and in 06, and they actually were the predecessor. They created what is now the Wounded Warrior Battalion concept at both Camp Lejeune and Camp Pendleton. So tremendous organization again, and I ran transition services for them initially. So we talked about transition, and mine was fairly seamless, but I really got a deeper understanding of some of the struggles that people have when they hang the uniform up. And if they do have some sort of injury or service-connected disability that makes it more challenging for them in everyday life, it's certainly going to make it more challenging for them to transition. So Another great opportunity to learn. I ran strategic corporate partnerships at Hope before I left, being able to connect companies to the mission, which is, again, a critical piece of fundraising and drawing in the veteran employees at a particular corporation. I talk about, connect the DNA from a company that has a big veteran presence to a national nonprofit now like us at Project Healing Waters. They really get to partner in a deeper way. And so I was recruited for this role here at Project Healing Waters and joined September 19th of 2022 as the CEO. So it had some progressive leadership roles that really, I don't think anything prepares you fully, but it prepared me as well as it could have for me to step into an organization, a national organization like this.
I really like how you kind of let yourself mature in the nonprofit space. You understood some of the ins and outs of it, and certainly, I've learned that it is a business. It's a not-for-profit business, but it's still a business, and you still
Correct.
have to, one, serve your client base and provide your service, but you have to raise money, and a lot of people miss that. And your business is taking a veteran who looks like it's primarily they're disabled, or maybe not. I want to get clarity on that.
I'll talk, yep, for sure.
And then you provide them events, for lack of a better term, where they can learn aspects of fishing, fly fishing, different types of outdoor fishing primarily, and connect with other veterans, connect with service providers, and connect with people. So I found that very interesting because we're learning that loneliness plays a whole lot into how someone handles their PTSD.
Yep.
Or even if they're not PTSD and they're just cut themselves off from people, it leads down to a dark path. So, and then I guess I want to start with first, if I understood the website correctly in the write-up, last year, your organization helped over 6,000 people do this activity.
Correct.
Which I thought was, okay, that's not insignificant. That's not like you had a one-time event where 100 veterans came out and they fished for a couple hours and went home.
Right.
This is truly a nationwide program on a large scale. So I'm trying to figure out where I want to begin because I got my notes here. I'm like, we're just going to cast the rod and dive right in.
Yeah. Can I begin at the beginning? I'd love to give you just a quick origin
Absolutely,
story.
sir.
I think it'll
Absolutely.
help
Go right ahead. Help me out
illuminate
here.
where we are.
Help me out here.
Our founder, Ed Nicholson, was a retired Navy captain, Vietnam era surface warfare officer. And in 2005, he was in what was at the time the Walter Reed Army Medical Center for his own treatments. And again, if you think of the timeline of our country, that's 4 continuous years of sustained combat operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. So Ed saw what you would expect, a ward full of young soldiers, Marines, airmen in hospital beds, some with limb loss, many, I'm certain, with post-traumatic stress, if not all of them, at least whether they had the disorder diagnosed. I don't think you can come out of a combat operation without some sort of post-traumatic stress. Sebastian Younger in his book Tribe talks about that a lot. And I'll reference that because we reference that book quite a bit. But Ed is a lifelong outdoorsman and angler. And he just had a calling at that moment, looking at all these young, I call them kids, they probably felt that way, but he talked to someone in the hospital and just said, hey, can I just take him outside and teach him how to cast? Just take him out on the grass outside Walter Reed. And they said yes. And they graduated to a pond that was on the campus, but it was that moment. I'm certain, and I've had several great conversations with Ed. He's an amazing individual, but I'm sure he didn't go, wow, I think this can manifest itself into almost 200 local programs nationwide in 20 years. But I do believe he understood how profound it was that he got them out of that sterile hospital environment, many with traumatic brain injury, which again, back then was relatively, it was known that it was a factor, but how well it was understood was very limited. And so it's that moment I refer to as our North Star, right? That anytime we get, in the midst of business, we're trying to make changes, I'm like, let's come back and stand next to Ed in Walter Reed and go, can I just take them outside and teach them how to cast? Because that'll help keep our compass heading on what really are we doing here? We want to take veterans fishing. So fast forward, I come on board as the CEO in 2022. And as you said, last year we had almost 7,000 veterans served in our programs nationwide. We're anywhere from 170 to 200, depending, and it's because they're volunteer led, and I'll talk about that. That's such a critical piece. But we're in 48 states. We're somehow not in Louisiana, but we're going to remedy that. I know, right? And Hawaii, which everybody's like, oh, Saint, I'll do a site visit. I'm like, I think we have people over there that we can work on. But
Oh, darn.
the whole point, and you talked about this, Travis, and it is the critical part of what we do at Project Healing Waters. We build community. We bring these participants back into a community, which so often is what they're missing more than anything. And so we do four main we call our local chapters, we call them programs, but then our programming is learning how to tie flies. They get to build their own fly rod if they want to, which is pretty exciting. We have equipment already set up for that, and none of this is at any cost whatsoever to the veteran participants. So fly tying, rod building, they get some great casting instruction. And then they go out on some day outings. There's opportunities for overnights, but the programs meet a minimum of twice a month. Many meet weekly. And so I refer to this as continuity of community. You talked about maybe go fishing for a weekend with your buddies or a group of veterans. It's a phenomenal experience. You sit around the campfire at night, like that's where a lot of the storytelling happens and a lot of the healing happens. And then you go home. And if you don't have connectivity to that team, to that tribe, to people who are, hey, checking on you, hey, Travis, we met a month ago at that fishing outing. How are you doing? I'm in your area next week. Let's meet for coffee. So to have a continuity of community, that builds layers of connectedness, and it builds layers of resilience. And as you alluded to, I think people don't understand still, suicide is the second leading cause of death for veterans 45 and under. That group is the least likely to go to the VA, and I want to talk about that in a second. But people aren't dying because of combat trauma necessarily or deployments. It's because they're isolated and lonely in that moment, and they feel, man, I'm so disconnected from everybody. Here we are. And those are snapshots in time of someone's life. But if we can build that community so that they're not isolated and they're like, man, I just helped. Now I've been in this program for a year. I just helped teach this brand new Air Force vet how to tie his first fly. And he's giddy about it. Like that's the fun thing. And that's what really, we talk about the healing journey that our participants go on, but that's where it all happens with our volunteers, who I refer to as the point of impact of our mission, because we've got maybe 14 full-time staff. We've got volunteers that run all of these programs. They do the mentoring, teaching, instruction, all that stuff. And so it's about the community that keeps people healthy and connected and safe.
I like that aspect of continuity of community, because I think a lot of times there's the one event, you do the event and it's like, okay, we'll see you next year.
Yep.
And it was great, but reality comes crashing down very quickly when you walk into your door. But what is it about fly fishing that people respond to versus when, say, when I think of fishing, I think of the bass fishing, or, taking my bobber out there and casting in there and just, what is it about fly fishing that people respond to so well?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, and I would still, I'm an inexperienced angler. I didn't have very much experience when I came on board, and I thought that would be a factor. And they said, hey, we need your leadership and your business background. We'll teach you how to fish. So God bless all the people who are trying to teach St. Langford how to fish better. But being out on the water again, and I'll just use where I am in Northern Colorado, which is we just moved a year ago, our national office from Maryland to Northern Colorado, and I can talk about that. But there's a couple components. I think when you look at, well, before you're even out on the water and tying flies, especially for someone with some focus issues, maybe they have traumatic brain injury, or there's, they're thinking and processing about things that are negative, or they just can't focus. When you sit down in front of a vise and you have someone teaching you, how to tie a fly, you become very focused, and that's a critical part of it. And then when you sit back and you go, man, I just tied this fly that is, we call it match the hatch, to try to replicate a bug on the water. And there's an immediate sense of accomplishment and pride. And that alone is a big part of, oh, I just tied that one. That's not as good as I thought I could do. Can you help me fix this? And then they sit down and then they're doing that constant improvement. It's the same thing. They go through, several weeks of building their own fly rod. And, they put the threads on it the color they want, and they can put, their name on there, or a, motivational phrase or something. And then they learn how to cast. And again, there's this rhythmic kind of art to casting. And of
Right.
course, the experts will look at any, it's just like the Marines. And now I come back to our experience, especially enlisted. Anytime an officer walked out in front of a formation, what did you do? You looked at his uniform like,
Yeah.
oh man, that ribbon, that's not a quarter of an inch, if you can tell from the fourth squad, And so in the fly fishing community, I think it's, it's part and parcel of any activity, but, casting is such a critical component of the sport. But there's just a rhythmic nature to it. And to be in the water, you can get into a deeper conversation if you're in a river about flow and what that means, to your mental health. But I think it's just being outside. And again, it's with people that our volunteers care so deeply about the participants to make sure that these men and women of all services, all eras, there's not a criteria that you have to be post 9/11 or anything like that. They learn how to do this thing, and they can take it with them, and they can, on the weekends, maybe take their son or their daughter fishing, and it just becomes a lifelong activity for your mental health. And it's a critical thing. I want to make a point here, but we're not a fly fishing club. We're Project Healing Waters, and we use fly fishing as an intervention. The VA would say what we do is an adjunct treatment. We're not clinical in any way. We're therapeutic. It's about therapeutic outdoor recreation, but we're squarely in the veteran mental health space. That's why we do what we do, and that's why the program works, because people will come. The stories we have about, and when I first came on board, I was a little skeptical because I heard people say, well, yeah, Project Healing Waters and fly fishing saves lives. I'm like, well, that sounds good. I'm telling you what, Travis, I have talked to more people now in my 2+ years. It saves lives. There are people, we've got a great video, and I'll send you the link to, maybe you can share it with your audience at some point. It's 20 years of a healing journey. Cameron Cushman is one of our content creators, amazing filmmaker, Army veteran himself, and he's highlighted in the video, but he said, it saved my life. And literally, you get out again in that water and you find peace and you find purpose, and then you find this tribe of people who want to help you, and you can help them, and that's really where it all happens.
You're talking about putting someone in an environment where they're not familiar, with coaching, with support.
Yep.
They move away from their current reality and just embracing the moment. And you're not overstating that their lives are saved. And it's been around for quite some time now. So as you move into 2025, we're recording this in January, what's the vision for Project Healing Waters going into this year? I guess we could couch that too with, you mentioned the corporate relationship. And
Yep.
I'd like you to kind of dive in that a little bit, because that is overlooked a lot of times when you're trying to do something as ambitious as you all are.
Yeah, so funding for any nonprofit is the lifeblood, right? Without funding, again, there's zero cost to any veteran participant on average, without, a longer overnight trip or something more expensive. It's about $500 a year to get a veteran participant through, a year of programming with the rod building and all those other things. And so obviously funding and revenue is key. We're building some really strong, and you understand this, I'm sure, but funding sources come from individuals. They'll come from foundations and grants, which are great. We seek out grants that are focused on therapeutic recreation because we're one of the leading nonprofits in that. But finding companies that you can connect to the mission, and as I said, a larger corporation, like we're building a great partnership with Leidos, who has a tremendous veteran employee resource group in their employees. And so being able to do that with them, Deloitte came out to our office in Windsor, Colorado, and helped do a river access project with us. So companies want to be able to volunteer. The veterans in the organization see what we do and go, man, I'd love to help, or I could use the help. Like that's where it really is important. We're building out a great partnership with Yeti, which is exciting. Golden Corral, the president and CEO of Golden Corral, Lance Trineri, they've been supporting us for over 15 years. He's just an amazing human being, but he'll come to some of our events and we'll do events with them, and he gets it. So I actually have an opportunity in a week and a half or so to go present to the Golden Corral Corporation and all their franchisees about Project Healing Waters. So finding those corporate connections, again, there's a funding stream, which is critical for us to grow. And there's also just, I think, connecting with a purpose to our mission inside the company that resonates with a lot of people.
You have these initiatives going on, you're doing these events. I'm just curious, what's it like for you to watch that veteran who has TBI, has PTSD, has an injury, change in front of you when they start casting that rod for the first time, or they're working with someone to tie their own fly? And it's my understanding that, making your own fly bait, and I might be mangling that term, is not just a process, it's an art. Like I know some people who put a lot of effort into it. But for you, what's that like watching that metamorphosis take place, sir?
It's powerful. I mean, it's what that observation in real time of healing, whether it's emotional or physical, is so powerful. It's what led me to this space in the first place, as I talked about when I saw those disabled veterans gain confidence. It's reflected in their face. So you'll see someone go out on the water for the first time, and I relate because I've caught, I think, more trees than fish with my back cast, but they're nervous and they want to be out there, and the mentorship and just the comfort that our volunteers provide, and they'll get somebody out on the water, and some have maybe balance issues because they have a prosthetic leg or there's something else, but so you can see kind of the tension on the face, and they're trying to remember what they were taught, and they're overthinking it, which is common. And then you see them either hook a fish, they may not get it to the net, but they see the fish rise because the fish are coming up to find the bugs on the water, and hopefully your fly that you tied replicates that enough that they go for yours. But the expression, the countenance, if you will, on their face changes, and that's for me the most powerful thing to watch, because that there was something transformative in the experience that they, and we have an obligation to continue to provide that for them so they continue to grow, to be strengthened, to be connected in that community and build the resilience that they're struggling to with whatever it is. Again, it's not about combat trauma. It's about, are you a veteran in need? And I'll talk about our mission set. You mentioned disabled veterans, but watching that change on their face, that's what makes the difference. And then you hear their stories, and man, I tell you, it's tough being a CEO, especially as a Marine who, you know, I tear up at, you know, the Folgers Christmas commercial when Mikey comes home from college. I'm like, oh man, that's really amazing. So, but I'm so moved emotionally by the mission that we're providing. And then when you hear a young, you know, there's a Marine veteran that I know that came to one of our events last summer. He was in jail. He was on drugs. He was heading towards death, either at his own hand or in a car accident, whatever. And someone introduced him in the hospital, I think, and said, "Hey, you got to try Project Healing Waters." Saved his life and changed his life. And the stories are all over the country, and it's impossible not to be moved by that.
And you didn't mention, you know, this briefly, but please expand on the types of veterans in the population you serve. I want to clarify that, please.
Sure. So we are, and it's not just veterans. You know, we have
Oh, really?
Some active duty service members, Guard, Reserve. We're open. We're doing where we started. Back to that origin story. A lot of our programs were through the VA. So whether they were an inpatient program or an outpatient program, most of our original programming was delivered through the VA, and we still have that. But we have a great program at Camp Lejeune through the Wounded Warrior Battalion. I believe Pendleton now has access to that. So it's the current eligibility. And then, well, I'll just talk about the veterans. Any branch of service and any era. So we have Vietnam era. Again, Ed Nicholson, our founder, was served in Vietnam, but we have some Vietnam era folks, and we have some veterans and service members as young as my two that are active duty in the Marines, you know, late 20s, early 30s. So, and that's a beautiful thing, Travis, to see all of them come together for a single purpose, and to see, you know, one of our older, more seasoned volunteers who may or may not be a veteran. Many of our volunteers are not, but maybe they came in as a participant and then they became a volunteer, to sit down with such care and humor. And, you know, we're all in the military. If you're a Marine sitting down to tie your very first fly, and it's an Air Force or an Army, you know, volunteer, there's going to be some talk, and that's okay. And that's good. And that's fun, right? That helps break it up. But there's so much care given by our volunteers to support our participants from all eras. And, you know, we started an initiative last year officially that came from a conversation I had with one of our incredible participants. She's a Coast Guard veteran. She's also highlighted in that movie that I mentioned that I'll send you the link to. She also says unequivocally, fly fishing saved her life. I asked her, I was maybe 4 months into my role, maybe a couple more, but we were at an event in Montana, and we're sitting at dinner, and I'm, you know, trying to get to know people and still get my CEO sea legs underneath me. And I just asked her what her experience was like as a woman veteran participant. She's a very experienced angler, and she is part of a tremendous program. Our Bozeman program leadership is outstanding. But she said it's tough when you're one of three, or one of two, or one of one. If you're the only woman veteran and it's just reflected in our military, right?
Sure.
So from that conversation, we created what we call the Women on the Fly initiative, not to be a separate kind of women's Project Healing Waters at all, but to get veterans and some other volunteers who are not veterans but are in the fly fishing industry, to get some mental health clinicians, and to talk about their experience, so that we can then take those lessons learned and put them out to all of our programs across the country. So that just started, and we're excited about that. But we serve everybody. Again, well, let me caveat that. We serve veterans in need. And so I want to be careful as we start to expand our approach If you got a second, I'll give you my perspective on disabled veterans and why I think. So, and you understand this for the listeners that don't, when people talk about disabled veterans, they're talking about technically a service member who was, examined by a VA doctor and was determined to have a service-connected disability. And so within that disability range, and people, and again, you understand this, but when I say you can have a 0% disability, they're like, what does that mean exactly? But the VA will determine from 0 to 100% your disability rating, and that will dictate, monthly payments you get or treatment that you can get, et cetera. And that's part and parcel. You and I raised our hand the exact same way. That is a benefit for us who serve, whether it's 4 years or 24 years. Couple things that I have always bothered me about that. I think the term is limiting on its face to be like a disabled veteran. I think especially for the civilian community, there is an automatic assumption, and I'm not criticizing why this is, but I think many that I talk to, if you say, oh, I'm a disabled veteran, or that person's a disabled veteran, they immediately go, oh, they have a combat injury.
Yep.
And I met somebody at that same event where I had that conversation with our Coast Guard participant. This young man is 100% disabled, just a tremendous spirit, but he had a pallet of steel rods fall on him in a base, a CONUS base, wasn't deployed. He's 100% disabled, and understandably and rightfully so, right? But I use this, we have a real world example of a guy he's in his 30s. He was an Army medic deployed to Afghanistan. So by virtue of his MOS, he was immersed in trauma, right? And we talked again about the suicide rate for veterans 45 and under, the hesitance that so many of them have to go to the VA. They don't trust the VA. They'll save that money for someone who really needs it, which people who say that often really need it themselves. And whatever the reason is, he will not go to the VA. And then I use this example for this kind of conversation. So this is not a real person, and it's not a slam on the Air Force, but I'm here in northern Colorado. Buckley Air Force Base is here. Let's say you have an airman who's been in the Air Force for 4 years. He's getting out. His supervisor says, hey, make sure you go see the VA doc. Maybe you'll get some money. So he goes to the doc, he gets checked out. And he said, is there anything wrong? He's like, well, I've been on the flight line, for the bulk of my career. Sometimes I have ringing in my ears. The doc says, well, you probably have tinnitus, but we tested your hearing and it's not at a loss that would allow us to get money, but we're going to give you a 0% disability rating. And that young airman walks out of the VA clinic. And again, this is not a slam at all. This is a benefit, but he has a piece of paper that says I'm a disabled veteran and therefore is eligible to come to Project Healing Waters. Meanwhile, we have a combat trauma Army medic who doesn't have that piece of paper. So one of the things that we're moving towards is less, are you a disabled veteran? And more, are you a veteran in need of a healing journey with Project Healing Waters? And there's, again, you understand challenges. I don't want the professional, some veterans, very small few, but they like to leverage that disability tag to go, what free things do I have? And again, I think they're a significant minority, but that's where we're heading as an organization, because we have this population that's killing themselves at the cyclic rate. And if they don't have a disability rating as determined by the VA, they can't officially be here. So we're working on changing that so that we can open up the aperture.
Well, I think you made a very good point with the delineation between disabled, non-disabled, service-connected, non-service connected, and you're not wrong. There is a segment of our community that if they're 10%, 100%, whether they can or not, they're going to take every free thing they can get.
Right.
That's just the facts. It's not anecdotal in any way, shape, or form. But, I think it's great that you all accept people who may not have served in combat, but got hurt on the job. I mean, you can make the argument that being in combat for a lot of us is actually safer than being, in garrison. So I appreciate you all make that distinction. As we wind this down, I mean, this hour has gone lightning fast. It's been great. We could so
I've
much
enjoyed it thoroughly. Yeah.
What truly is like future state for Project Healing Waters? Because to me, you can kind of, if you listen to what you're saying, sir, there's the gradual shift in scope, scale, and now priority. What do you see in the next couple of years for what you want to do with Project Healing Waters?
Yeah, thanks, Travis. It's a great question. And, as the CEO, especially when you come into an organization that has the history and you know, the popularity, for lack of a better term, that people love this organization who've been part of it. There's some challenges. Again, we talk about it being a business. We have to keep pace with, we have market forces that are arrayed against us like any other business. And how do we get a share of the donor dollars and all those other things? Because there's tremendous organizations in the space. And so I talk about three main things when I came on board, and I just captured the vision in elevate, accelerate, and focus forward. And the focus forward is, whatever decisions are made back here, all well-intentioned, sometimes they're not the best in the long term for an organization. So you have to do some forensics from a business standpoint and go, how do we get here? And then you have to look out forward. People, and you know this, in any realm of life, if you're always doing this and looking backwards, you're never going to get where you need to go. So focus forward is a mindset for my team. The accelerate piece talks to the business. I expect us to be as agile a business as any for-profit, and best practices. And if there's something new, that we're going to adopt that if it makes sense for us. Do our systems and platforms that we use, are they integrated and communicate? Do we have too many redundant? All those things that a business, how can we find efficiency, number one, to make the business operate more effectively, but also can we reduce costs on our end so we can put more of the donor dollar towards programming? And then the elevate piece is coming to the answer to your question. My expectation, not my hope, and as you know, hope's not a course of action, Lieutenant, which I heard often. My expectation is Project Healing Waters is going to be, in the next couple of years, in the same conversations of the top tier veteran nonprofits, and I'll say them because I believe in them. Gary Sinise Foundation, Fisher House Foundation is tremendous. Wounded Warrior Project went through some pretty challenging changes back in 2015, got new leadership, back on the step, Tunnel to Towers. They're led with integrity, they're led with transparency, and they have an impact that it scales and grows, and they're really impacting our veterans and service members' lives. And so my expectation is we'll be in those conversations because of the impact that we're having on veteran mental health and doing substantive, tangible things to reduce veteran suicide. So I expect us, we're partnered with Psych Armor, which is another great organization.
Yeah.
The CEO, Tina Atherall's on our board. Just really tying into those thought leaders in the veteran mental health space. We expect to be there because there's a lot more veterans in need that we want to get on this healing pathway, and then spread that across the country.
Last question I always want to ask this, especially nonprofits. Well, it's a question and a half, sir. One, how can people help you move the mission forward? I'm talking about financially, of course, but
Sure.
Any other way?
Yeah, so they can go to our website, first of all, projecthealingwaters.org. There's ways to support. Again, we always look for, and I'm never shy about asking for people to invest financially in our mission. That's how we're able to grow, reach, and impact. But whether you're a veteran or not, volunteer. Being able to be part of that, like I talked about, to experience a participant who's, a little bit in their shell, and they're a little nervous about that, and you watch them physically and, more importantly, emotionally come out of that, and then they're just excited and they want to come back there. I think that's where you see that continuity of community that's so important. So volunteer. If you're an experienced angler and want to come help teach fly tying or rod building, et cetera, is great. If you are a veteran, and you're listening to this and you think, man, I could really use that. All of our local programs are found on our locations tab on our website. Take a look and reach out and get involved. It's a fun place. That's another thing as a CEO. I want for my staff this to be a fun place to work, and we do. But it's a serious mission that we're helping change people's lives and in many cases, as I said, save lives. So it's a humbling. I talk about serving with humility and gratitude, and that's really how I feel as a CEO.
Well, I'm just looking at Massachusetts where I'm out of, sir, and yeah, there's two locations, and well, three actually in Mass. I'm going to check out more in depth, so I learn something new every day.
Good.
And then last question, got to ask this: is the website? The website is projecthealingwaters.org.
Correct.
That's the best place to get all the intel. You're on social media. I will have all those links in the Oscar Mike Radio Show post on this, sir. So, I want to thank you for coming on and talking with us. There's so many ways to advocate for veterans. There's so many things that have been tried that are working. And I don't know about you, sir. I kind of go Occam's razor on this one. I think sometimes the simplest solutions are the best solutions. And there's something very simple but powerful with a fishing rod in your hand, hearing the water around you, and just connecting with nature. So I can't wait to see what you all do next.
Humans can complicate things in a heartbeat. So I'm with you, Travis. Get in the water, get a line in the water, get some healing, and build your tribe. And that's really what we're all about. So grateful to have this conversation. Look forward to another one down the road.
Absolutely, 100%. Look, I'm Travis with Oscar Mike Radio. I'm with John St. Langford, Marine Corps veteran, enlisted and officer, air winger. Yay. And again, the CEO of an organization, again, that puts the healing in the veterans or active duty service members' hands. Love seeing this kind of stuff. And yes, sir, we'll talk again. So he's Oscar Mike. I'm Oscar Mike. And as we say in Oscar Mike, we're Mission in Flight. Thank you very much for watching.
The biggest fear Gold Star families have that their child will be forgotten.
We need to never forget freedom wasn't free.
It's the fact that they give us the life we have now. We should remember them and give thanks to them.
If I can be a part of something today that's going to make the surviving family of any of these veterans, these heroes, feel better tomorrow, then it's worth it.
That one wreath symbolizes one family that was able to smile because of the generous donations.
To sponsor a wreath and honor a veteran, visit wreathsacrossamerica.org.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load Co-Sinista One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.